Hey again, this is Daryl. Today I'm going to be making my beef jerky recipe. So this is a recipe that I've been doing for about 35 years. I do it every year, usually multiple times per year. I always do it at Christmas, and seeing how Christmas is next week, here we are. This is what I put in all the kids and grandkids stockings. So if you've been good this year, and you come to my house for Christmas, then you're probably going to get some beef jerky. It's very popular. Everybody fights over it, over who gets the biggest share, and stealing other people's jerky. So I think it's worth doing. Of course, you can modify this any way you want. Jerky's pretty tolerable to switching up ingredients. So whatever fancies you, you can add more of something or less of something else. But this is what I do. This is pretty much going to be a double recipe because I make a lot of it. So we'll start out with about 1.5 cups of sugar, just regular white sugar. You're going to put a full cup of salt. Now you want to use non-iodized salt. So if what you have sitting in your cupboard is this, iodized, you want to go and buy this one. It does not say iodized, and if you look at the fine print, it says it doesn't contain iodine. I always thought that you needed non-iodized because there was a taste, but I've researched it a little bit, and it sounds like the iodine will discolor your meat. So if you're preserving meat, you usually want it to keep sort of the color of whatever it is that you're preserving. Iodine will cause it to discolor and get real dark. So that's why I guess people avoid the iodine. So for this, I always buy non-iodized salt. And in this recipe today that I'm going to make, it's a full cup of salt. Remember, you're preserving this meat, so you're gonna have quite a bit of salt in it. Next, another salty ingredient, soy sauce. For the recipe today, 4 cups. I'm also gonna put in 4 cups of water, just regular tap water. I'm going to be doing about, overall about 10 pounds of meat. So whatever will fit in this recipe, I'm going to put it in. What won't fit, I'll just keep it in the refrigerator until I get some of it smoked up, and then I can add it back into the brine. So I'll put as much of that 10 pounds of meat in there as I can. So there's the water. That was 4 cups of water. I'm going to put 2 cups of a dry wine. This is a Cabernet Sauvignon, so something that's not sweet. You don't have to use like really good wine. This is you know, not your top shelf here, and I probably won't drink the rest of it. I'll set aside, and my wife can have it if she'll drink it. I won't tell her that it's no good. I'll just pour her a glass. Okay, wine. We're going to put about 2 tablespoons of onion powder. So just your regular. This is actually granulated onion, works just as well. 2 tablespoons. Two tablespoons of garlic powder. Like I said, again, these are fairly rough estimates. I mean, if you wanted more, you can put more. When your jerky's out of the brine and afterwards, you can put stuff on it at that point. I'll cover that later. So garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of pepper. I usually use kind of a coarser pepper. I like the pepper when it's stuck to the meat, and I always put more pepper on my meat after I'm after it's done in the brine anyway. So then we got Louisiana hot sauce. This is a type of Louisiana hot sauce, Crystal. A couple tablespoons of this. I usually don't measure it. I just put a couple tablespoons in. And then the same thing with Worcestershire sauce. A couple tablespoons. And that's it. I mean, the recipe is not complicated. I think it's way better than anything that you would buy in the store. All the family that eats this, really the store-bought jerky is just something they don't even care to have once you've had your own homemade beef jerky. So that takes care of making the brine. I'm going to set this aside, stop the video for a second, get the meat out, and then I'll kind of describe what I do with the meat. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about the meat. Typically what I do every year is I buy a meat called Eye of the Round. Now, Eye of the Round is a very long, straight-grained meat. There's almost no fat on it. The problem is it's gotten very expensive, but it's perfect for jerky, because when you make jerky, you want to get rid of all the fat. Fat spoils, it gets greasy. When you do jerky, you're preserving the meat so it can last a long time. You can have it around. People also like the taste, but you don't want fat in there. Fat kind of turns into like globs when you're chewing on it, so it's just gross. So Eye of the Round's perfect because there's usually no fat. What I bought this year is a sirloin, like a sirloin tip. It was a couple dollars a pound cheaper than the Eye of the Round, but there's going to be some work to it. You can see in this meat, and I'll show you close up in a second, there's a lot more fat. There's this, what you call silver skin on it. The grain kind of goes multiple ways in this meat, so it's going to be a little harder to cut up. When I do jerky, I cut the jerky with the grain. So the length of the grain is following the piece of jerky. What that gives you is something that's got a lot more chew and a lot more like pull to it when you try to bite it. If you like your jerky to kind of fall apart when you eat it, then cut it against that grain, kind of like you would cut a steak. When you cut a steak, the grain's very short. That's what makes it tender. So if you want your jerky more tender, then you cut it against that grain. If I was a cowboy and I was running around out in the prairie on my horse and I had this stuffed in my saddlebag, I would want it cut with the grain, because if it was cut against the grain, it'd probably just turn into dust. So let me stop the camera, I'll bring it up closer, and I'll kind of show you how I proceed in cutting this thing up. As I said a moment ago, this is going to be a lot more complicated to cut up than the Eye of the Round. Eye of the Round is going to be a long, round piece of meat, and when you cut it, you'll just see the grain running straight through that meat. It makes perfect jerky. This, you can see the grain kind of here is kind of going this way. This piece over here is kind of going like this. If I look on this here, it's kind of got a separation between the muscle here where the grains are going two different ways. I'm going to go in and I'm going to remove all the fat that I can. I'm going to remove all the silver skin, and I'll get it to the point where I'm ready to start slicing the meat. Okay, so now I've removed most of the surface fat and gristle and that sort of thing. I've cleaned it up pretty good. Again, I keep mentioning it, but the Eye of the Round really make your life a lot easier if you want to do this. That, or maybe just a big round roast. You want something that's got very little fat. If you were to buy something that's like you want a steak and you buy a prime cut steak, it's got a lot of fat through the meat. That's not what you want for jerky. You want cheap meat, like a select level meat. So there's select, and there's choice, and there's prime. You want the lower grade meat, it's gonna have less fat. So anyway, this is not too bad. I had a little bit of waste, maybe about a pound of waste. I could see the grain in this meat is kind of going this direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice slices about the width that I want my jerky. So first step is to slice like this. And I'll take out this type of thing so you can see the grains going straight through that way. So I do these about maybe 3/4 of an inch wide. Inch wide doesn't, doesn't have to be perfect. So you can see that's not too bad. There's a little bit of fat in there, but that's not bad at all. You can see the grains going straight through this, so this is going to work great for my purposes. What I do next is I'm just going to show you how I slice it for jerky. But what I'll be doing, I'm going to slice all this up in long pieces like this. I'm going to lay them on a cookie sheet and put them in a freezer for about 20 minutes. It'll make it very stiff. And then when I slice my jerky, I can make nice jerky slices. But just for purposes of this video, I'm going to show you how I slice it. And I can just do that with this. So I slice it fairly thin, maybe less than 1/4 of an inch. Again, this is all sliced with the grain. It's going to give you a jerky with more pull to it. So if you've got bad teeth or you just like tender jerky, then for this you would slice it this way. See how the grain goes. You can see that grain like that. I'm slicing with the grain. If you want your jerky tender, slice it like this, and it'll be little short pieces and it'll pretty much just come apart. Okay, so anyway, that's what the jerky is going to look like when you put it in the brine. So I'm going to make sure that brine's nice and stirred up. Then I'm going to throw all this jerky in there. I'm going to continue cutting until I get it all in the brine. There's one more ingredient that I like to add in my brine, and I didn't mention it before. I throw some red pepper flakes in there, maybe a tablespoon or something. Helps give it a little kick. So anyway, I'm going to slice all this up, and the next time you'll see me, I will be putting it on the racks. Okay, so it's been about 18 hours since I put this jerky into my brine. So what I'm going to do now is put it on the racks. So we'll just set this aside. I start pulling meat out of my brine and just lay it on the racks. Lay it flat, not touching. You see I've got all different sizes here. Sometimes that comes in handy when you're trying to rack it up. I put a piece of paper towel underneath this to catch some of the additional liquid. I do different flavors. So some of this I'm going to sprinkle black pepper on. Some of it I will do red pepper flakes. You can do garlic powder, whatever flavor you like on your jerky, you can add that. Okay, so that's pretty good there. Take some black pepper. And this is the coarse pepper is good for this. If you don't like too much pepper, I don't do it all like this because not everybody likes the pepper. So I kind of do a little bit of everything. Then these racks, that's all you have to do. You don't really have to, I don't rinse my meat or anything when I do jerky. So this is the rack that's going to go in the smoker. So this just goes in here. Usually easier than that. And there you go. So I can get 4 racks here. Then I've got another smoker out there that'll take 5 more racks. So I should be able to rack up most of this meat. We'll come back once I've got it racked. Okay, I finished getting all the jerky on the racks. You can see, got it all racked up here. Some of it I put pepper flakes on, red pepper flakes, a little bit goes a long ways. I put black pepper on some, garlic powder, some I've done nothing. So just experiment. If you like sweeter jerky, this is what I would consider a savory jerky. If you like something sweet, then you put more sugar in your marinade, use brown sugar, honey, whatever you like. So show you what I ended up with here. I've got this rack full and this rack here full. I've got enough to probably do 2 more racks. As some of this comes out, I'll rack that up. This won't all get done at the same time. You have warmer parts in your smoker. This is not cut by a machine, it's all cut by hand. So some of it might be thicker, take it a little longer. So as it gets done, I probably won't need to worry about this for another 8 hours or so after it goes in the smoker. But as pieces get done, I can pull them out and make room for the rest of my jerky. So we'll come back in a little bit and we'll talk about the smoker. I need to add that you want to let this sit out now. So it's on the racks. You're going to let it sit for about an hour. It develops sort of a sticky sheen on it. And so then when you put it on the smoker, that smoke will stick to the meat. If you don't have a smoker, you could still do this. A lot of people use dehydrators. My brother-in-law just did some a couple weeks ago with a dehydrator and it was delicious. Same, basic sort of recipe. You won't get the smoke taste. And also the smoke helps with the prevention of like bacteria and spoilage. So smoke helps preserve the meat. So if you do it in a dehydrator, you don't necessarily get that side of it, but you keep the stuff in the refrigerator, it's still going to be fine for a couple of weeks. Okay, at this point we're ready to put these things in the smoker. You can see what I use here. It's one of them's called a Little Chief, the other one's called a Big Chief. These are they don't look like much, but the one on the left, the Little Chief, those are about $100 right now. Back when I got it, they were much more inexpensive. The one on the right, the Big Chief, those run about $125. I think for that you get a little like a recipe book. They also give you some chips, so it's everything you need to get going. I've got other smokers for other things. These are perfect for jerky, salmon, sausages, anything that takes a low cold smoke. So these smokers only run at about 165 degrees or so. I've got other smokers that I use for like briskets and ribs and things like that. These are not appropriate for that. These are, I specifically use these for jerky and salmon. So you can see the one over here, I plugged these in probably half an hour ago. I've got chips in it. You can see there's smoke coming out already. All they are is there's a heating element in the bottom, and there's a little tray here that you put the chips in. This is what the chips look like right over here. It's just a bag of, this is hickory. So you put these chips in that little tray, and then you plug this thing in. There's no on-off heat adjustment, anything. This is just, you plug it in and it's going. So let's pop it open here and you can see what we got going on. I don't know if you can see down in the bottom of that, probably can't, but there's a little tray. Maybe you can see it on the other one, but you just take this rack, drop it straight down in there, just like that. Stick the lid on. Do the other one. Okay, this one's not smoking as much yet, so hopefully you can see that. There's just a tray sitting in the bottom with wood chips in it. Okay, so these chips will burn in about half an hour or so. So for the first 3 hours or so, I'll be putting chips in there. So every half hour or so, I'm going to have to come out here and stick some chips in it. And after that 3 hours or so, I can just let it go. Probably in maybe 6 hours, 8 hours, I'll check it to see if some of it's getting done, and then I can start removing the ones that are done. I'm doing this in the winter time, so it's a little cooler out here. So what I do is I have an old blanket, and I just throw that blanket over the top like that. Helps keep some of the heat in. You can buy like little space blanket things that are made for these things, about 30, 40 bucks. But to me, you know, I just throw a blanket over it. In the summertime, you don't need that at all. Summertime, this stuff will get done a lot faster than in the winter. These are just thin aluminum smokers, so they're not built to hold in a lot of heat. So anyway, that's it for the moment. We'll come back on when we get some that's done, and I can kind of show you the final product. Okay, so here we have the final product. Most of this was in the smoker for probably 6 to 8 hours. So it doesn't take too awful long. You can tell it's done. It'll have just a little bit of give left in it. It'll still be a little bit flexible. You don't want to wait until it's hard, like a rock, because then once it sits out a little bit, it'll really dry out and you'll end up with something that's kind of dusty, and that's not very good. So I started out with, after the trimming, a little under 10 pounds of meat. I ended up with 4 pounds and 12 ounces of jerky. So the total cost of this was about 40 bucks for my ingredients. You're looking at about $8 a pound. So almost 5 pounds of jerky for $40. That's about half the price of what you would pay. And I would say it's twice as good as what you get in the store. So if you're ever interested in doing jerky, this is a good recipe. Give it a try.